The iron shackles bit into her ankles as Eliza Osborne stumbled through the dense undergrowth, the chain between her feet clanking with every desperate step. Behind her, she could hear the baying of hounds and the angry shouts of men, the prison guards who'd been hunting her since dawn. Wyoming Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman on the run, especially one convicted of a crime she didn't commit. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Eliza pushed herself forward, her prison uniform torn and filthy, her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. 6 months on a chain gang for a bank robbery, she had nothing to do with 6 months of breaking rocks and enduring the leers and threats of guards who believed a woman among men deserved whatever befell her. When the opportunity to escape had presented itself during a thunderstorm that scattered the guards, she'd taken it without hesitation. Blood trickled down her ankles where the cruel metal had rubbed her skin raw. Her lungs burned and her mouth was parched from thirst, but she dared not stop. The penalty for escape was hanging, and Eliza had no intention of swinging from the end of a rope for the entertainment of the good citizens of Copper Creek. She paused momentarily, leaning against a tree to catch her breath. The sounds of pursuit seemed to have faded, but she couldn't be sure. The rush of blood in her ears made it difficult to hear anything clearly. As she prepared to move again, a rustling sound nearby made her freeze. "Don't move," came a low, masculine voice. Eliza's heart pounded against her ribs. This was it, they'd caught her. She'd be dragged back to face the lash before they strung her up. "I said don't move, miss." Slowly, she turned her head toward the voice. Instead of the expected prison guard in his uniform, she saw a man on horseback. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, dusty clothes, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. "A cowboy, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please help me." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached cautiously, his eyes startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, taking in her prison garb, the shackles, and her desperate condition. "You're from the chain gang at Copper Creek," he stated matter-of-factly. Eliza nodded, too exhausted to deny it. "I didn't do what they said I did." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That's what they all say, miss. It's true, I was framed." She took a shaky step toward him, the chain rattling. "They're coming, they'll hang me, please." Before she could finish, the baying of hounds sounded closer. The man's head snapped up, his expression changing from wary to decisive in an instant. "My name's Nathan Evans. Get on my horse." "What?" "Unless you want to be caught, get on my horse. Now." With surprising gentleness, he lifted her onto his mount, then swung up behind her. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Nathan kicked the horse into motion, guiding it with expert skill through the trees, away from the sounds of pursuit. Eliza found herself pressed against his chest, his arms around her as he held the reins. "Why are you helping me?" She managed to ask as they rode. "I've got my reasons to distrust the law in these parts," he replied cryptically. "Besides, a lady in chains isn't something I can ride past without at least hearing her story." They rode hard for what felt like hours, the rhythmic pounding of the horse's hooves matching the pounding of Eliza's heart. Eventually, Nathan guided his horse into a shallow stream and followed its course for a considerable distance, before emerging onto rocky ground that would leave no tracks. As twilight descended, he finally slowed their pace. "My cabin's not far," he said. "You'll be safe there tonight." "And tomorrow?" Eliza asked, uncertainty in her voice. "Let's worry about getting those shackles off first." The cabin was small but sturdy, nestled in a clearing surrounded by pines. Nathan helped Eliza down from the horse, then led the animal to a small corral beside the structure. "It's not much," he said, opening the door, "but it's shelter." Inside was simple: a bed against one wall, a table and chairs, a stone fireplace, and shelves holding provisions. Nathan immediately set about starting a fire while Eliza stood awkwardly, the chains between her ankles limiting her movement. "Sit," he directed, pointing to a chair. "Let me look at those shackles." Eliza obeyed, watching as he rummaged through a wooden chest, eventually producing a set of tools. He knelt before her, examining the locks on her irons. "These are prison grade," he muttered, "but I've seen worse." "You've done this before?" she asked, surprised. Nathan looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers. I've got a past, same as you. He worked in silence for a time, the firelight dancing across his features. He was handsome. Eliza realized, not in the polished way of city men, but in the rugged, weathered manner of someone who lived by his own rules under the vast western sky. Why were you out there today? She asked. In those woods, hunting, he replied, focused on the lock. Though I didn't expect to find what I did. The first shackle finally gave way with a click, and Eliza gasped as it fell away. The relief was immediate, though the pain of her raw skin remained. Nathan gently examined her ankle, his touch causing her to wince. Sorry, he murmured. These need cleaning once I get the other one off. He resumed his work on the second lock, his brow furrowed in concentration. So, he said without looking up, what did they say you did? Eliza hesitated, then decided she owed him the truth after he'd risked his own freedom to help her. Bank robbery in Copper Creek, 6 months ago. 3 men robbed the bank, killed the manager. A woman was seen with them. I was new in town, working at the hotel. They said it was me. And it wasn't? No, I was serving breakfast to a family of travelers that morning. But they'd already left town when I was arrested, and no one else would speak for me. The second lock finally opened, and the remaining shackle fell to the floor with a clatter. Nathan set his tools aside and rose to fetch a basin of water and some clean cloths. I believe you, he said simply as he knelt again to tend to her injuries. Eliza stared at him, surprised by his easy acceptance. Why? He shrugged, gently cleaning the wounds on her ankles. I've got a sense about people, always have. He glanced up. Besides, a guilty woman wouldn't look at me the way you do, like you're afraid I might change my mind and turn you in. Can you blame me? She asked quietly. I don't know you. Fair enough. He finished cleaning her wounds and applied a salve that smelled of herbs. You need food, clean clothes, and rest. Then tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Nathan provided her with a shirt and trousers that were too large but clean. He turned his back while she changed, then offered her a simple meal of beans, dried meat, and coffee. Eliza ate ravenously, realizing only then how hungry she'd been. You can take the bed, he said when she'd finished. I'll sleep by the fire. I can't put you out of your bed, she protested. You're not, I'm offering. His tone brooked no argument. You've had a hard enough day. Too exhausted to protest further, Eliza found herself lying in Nathan's bed, the scent of him pine, leather, and something indefinably male surrounding her. Despite her anxiety about the future, the physical and emotional toll of the day soon pulled her into deep sleep. She awoke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, scanning the cabin. Nathan stood by the fireplace, cooking something that smelled delicious. He turned at her movement, offering a small smile. Morning, he said. Thought you might sleep till noon. Eliza pushed her tangled hair from her face. What time is it? Just past 8. He scooped scrambled eggs onto a plate and brought it to her. Eat, we need to talk. As she ate, Nathan explained his plan. They'll be searching every town and settlement for miles. You can't stay here long, it's too close to Copper Creek. I've got a friend in Wallace, Idaho. It's a good distance from here, and he owes me a favor. Idaho? Eliza set her fork down. That's so far. Exactly why it's safe. Nathan leaned against the table. I'll take you there. He can help you start fresh with a new name. You do that for me. Risk yourself like that. Nathan's eyes held hers. I told you I've got my reasons to distrust the law. What are they? She asked softly. A shadow crossed his face. That's a story for another time. Right now, we need to focus on getting you to safety. They spent the day preparing. Nathan provided her with better-fitting clothes apparently left behind by a sister who'd visited once and cut her hair shorter with a pair of shears. The transformation was startling. With her hair cropped close and dressed in men's attire, she could pass for a young man at a distance. The less you look like a woman on the run, the better, he explained. We'll travel as brothers heading to Wallace to work in the mines. Do I make a convincing brother? She asked, attempting humor despite her nerves. Nathan's gaze traveled over her, and something flashed in his eyes that had nothing to do with brotherly assessment. You'll do, he said gruffly, turning away. That evening, as they sat by the fire making final preparations, Eliza found the courage to ask more about her unexpected savior. "Where are you from originally, Nathan?" he continued, whittling a piece of wood, his hands never pausing. "Missouri, left when I was 16. Family." "None to speak of now." He glanced up. "What about you? Anyone missing Eliza Osborne?" She shook her head. "My parents died of fever 3 years ago. I was teaching school in Illinois, but the town couldn't afford a teacher anymore. I came west looking for work, and found trouble instead." "Not of my making," she reminded him. "No," he agreed, setting his whittling aside. "Not of your making." They fell silent, watching the flames. Eliza was acutely aware of his presence, his scent, the way the firelight played across his features. He'd saved her life, was risking his own, and she didn't even know why. "We leave at dawn," he finally said, rising. "Get some sleep." The journey to Wallace would take weeks on horseback, Nathan explained as they set out the next morning. They would avoid main roads and towns where possible, camping most nights. "What if we're stopped?" Eliza asked, adjusting her hat to better hide her face. "We've got our story, stick to it." Nathan checked his gun before holstering it. "And if things go bad, you run. Don't wait for me, don't look back, just run." The first days of travel passed uneventfully. They rode together on Nathan's horse, taking turns walking to spare the animal. At night, they camped in secluded spots, sharing simple meals and conversation that gradually grew less guarded. Nathan, she discovered, had been a ranch hand, a buffalo hunter, and briefly, a scout for the cavalry. He knew the land intimately and moved through it with the ease of someone born to the wild spaces of the West. He spoke little of his past beyond those bare facts, but his knowledge and skills told their own story. On the fourth night, as they huddled near a small fire in a rocky ravine, the weather turned. Cold rain began to fall, quickly soaking through their clothes and threatening to extinguish their fire. "There's a line shack about a mile north," Nathan shouted over the downpour. "Used by cattlemen during drives, should be empty this time of year." They gathered their meager belongings and rode through the storm, Eliza clinging to Nathan, her body pressed against his for warmth. By the time they reached the shack, little more than 4 walls and a roof, they were both shivering violently. Inside, Nathan worked quickly to start a fire in the small stove while Eliza wrung water from their blankets. The shack was tiny, just one room with a rough bunk, a table, and the stove. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Nathan said, his back to her as he fed kindling into the growing flames. "I won't look." Eliza hesitated only briefly before stripping off her sodden garments. She wrapped herself in the dampest of their blankets, the best option available, and hung her clothes near the stove. "Your turn," she said, facing the wall. She heard the rustle of clothing, then Nathan clearing his throat. "Decent now." When she turned, he was similarly wrapped in a blanket, his wet clothes steaming slightly as they hung beside hers. In the close confines of the shack, with both of them barely dressed, the atmosphere had changed. There was an awareness between them that hadn't been there before, or perhaps had been, but easier to ignore when not half naked and alone. "We should get some sleep," Nathan said, his voice slightly rough. "You take the bunk. And you'll sleep where? The floor is wet and it's freezing." Eliza gestured at the small space. "We're adults. We can share the bunk without impropriety." Nathan's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "If you're certain." The bunk was narrow, forcing them to lie close together, back to front. Eliza could feel the heat of Nathan's body against her back, his breath warm on her neck. Despite the innocence of the arrangement, her heart raced. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, "for everything." His arm, hesitantly, came around her waist, a protective gesture rather than a presumptuous one. "Try to sleep, Eliza," but sleep was elusive with him so close. She was acutely aware of every breath he took, every slight movement. When she finally did drift off, her dreams were filled with his presence, his hands, his eyes, his voice. She awoke to find herself turned toward him, her face inches from his. Nathan was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Morning," he said softly, "morning." She didn't move away, and neither did he. For a long moment, they simply gazed at each other. Then, with deliberate slowness, Nathan brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her skin. Eliza, he murmured, her name a question in his mouth. She answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as months of loneliness and fear gave way to need and desire. His arms tightened around her, drawing her closer, the blankets between them suddenly an unwelcome barrier. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "We shouldn't," he said, though his body told a different story. "Why not?" She asked, her hands still tangled in his hair. "Because you're vulnerable, running for your life, I won't take advantage." Eliza pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. "Is that what you think this is, me seeking comfort from the first man who's shown me kindness, isn't it?" She shook her head. "No, this is me choosing to be with a man I've come to admire, to trust, to want." Nathan searched her face, looking for uncertainty and finding none. "Are you sure?" In answer, Eliza kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation on either side. The blankets fell away as they came together, skin against skin, in the cool morning air of the lined shack. Outside, rain continued to fall, isolating them in their own private world where, for a few precious hours, there were no pursuers, no dangers, only the two of them discovering each other with increasing urgency. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Eliza traced the scars that marked Nathan's body, evidence of a hard life lived on the frontier. "Will you tell me now," she asked softly, "why you distrust the law, why you helped me?" Nathan was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, edged with old pain. "5 years ago, I was accused of rustling cattle from a powerful rancher named James Blackwell. I wasn't anywhere near his land when the theft happened, but he'd wanted my small spread for years, and this was his chance. The sheriff was in his pocket, the judge too. What happened? I was sentenced to 3 years in territorial prison, spent 18 months on a chain gang before I escaped during a storm not unlike you." Eliza raised herself on an elbow, looking down at him with new understanding. "That's why you helped me. You've been where I am." He nodded, reaching up to touch her face. "When I saw you in those woods in Shackles, desperate, it was like looking at myself. I couldn't ride past. What did you do after you escaped? Laid low, changed my name. Built a new life, piece by piece." He smiled faintly. "The man I was, Nathaniel Everett, is still wanted. Nathan Evans is a free man as far as anyone knows, so you risk that freedom for me." It wasn't a question. "Yes." His hand slid to the back of her neck, drawing her down for a gentle kiss. "And I'd do it again." The rain continued through the day, giving them excuse to remain in the lined shack, talking, loving, planning. By the time the weather cleared the following morning, something fundamental had changed between them. They were no longer simply fugitive and rescuer, they were partners, bound by shared experience and growing affection. As they resumed their journey, the dynamic shifted. They traveled more easily together, anticipating each other's needs, finding moments of laughter despite the constant vigilance their situation required. Nathan taught Eliza to shoot, to build a fire, to read track skills she might need if they were separated. "You're a natural," he said admiringly as she hit a makeshift target for the 3rd time in succession. "I had a good teacher," she replied with a smile that made his breath catch. 10 days into their journey, they encountered their first real danger. They had stopped in a small settlement to replenish supplies, with Eliza maintaining her disguise as Nathan's brother. As they were loading their purchases onto the horse, Nathan suddenly stiffened. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. "There are wanted posters with your face on them." The storekeeper is looking at them now. Eliza's blood ran cold. "What do we do?" "Act natural. We're leaving." Nathan finished securing their supplies, then helped Eliza mount. As they rode away at a deliberately unhurried pace, he murmured, "Don't look back." They maintained their composure until they were well out of sight of the settlement, then spurred the horse to a gallop. They didn't stop until nightfall, making camp in a hidden gully miles from any trail. "They know we're heading west," Nathan said as they huddled by a small, smokeless fire. "They'll be watching the main routes to Idaho. We could turn back," Eliza suggested, though the thought of giving up their goal made her heart sink. Nathan shook his head. No, we go north first, cross into Montana territory, then swing west into Idaho from there. It's longer but safer. The change in route added weeks to their journey, taking them through more rugged, less populated terrain. The challenges were greater, harsher weather, difficult river crossings, less game to hunt, but so was their determination. One night, camped in a stand of pines, Eliza woke to find Nathan sitting up, staring into the darkness beyond their fire. "What is it?" she asked, instantly alert. "Nothing." He glanced at her, then back to the darkness. "Just thinking." She moved to sit beside him, wrapping a blanket around them both. "About what?" "The future." He put his arm around her, drawing her close. "What happens when we reach Wallace? You said your friend would help me start over." "Yes," Nathan hesitated. "But I've been wondering if that's what you want." Eliza studied his profile in the firelight. "What do you mean, I mean?" He turned to face her. "Do you want to start over alone or with me?" Her heart stuttered. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Nathan took her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long. I know we met under the strangest circumstances imaginable, but these weeks with you. Eliza, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you." "Nathan, let me finish." His grip tightened. "I'm asking if you'd consider a life with me, not just in Wallace, but beyond. A real life together." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You want me to stay with you? I want to marry you," he said simply. "If you'll have me." She stared at him, momentarily speechless. Then, with a cry that was half laugh, half sob, she threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered against his skin. "Yes, I'll have you." They sealed their impromptu engagement with a kiss that quickly deepened, leading them back to their shared bedroll where they expressed in touch what words couldn't adequately convey. The following weeks took on a dreamlike quality for Eliza. Despite the constant vigilance their situation required, despite the hardships of their journey, she was happier than she'd ever been. The future, once so uncertain, now held promise: a home, a husband, perhaps someday children. A life reclaimed from the ashes of injustice. As they finally crossed into Idaho territory, the landscape changed, becoming more mountainous, the forests thicker. Nathan grew more relaxed as the miles between them and Wyoming increased. "We're close now," he told her one evening as they made camp in a beautiful alpine meadow. 2, maybe 3 more days to Wallace. "And your friend, you're sure he'll help us?" Nathan nodded, stoking their campfire. "Thomas Cooper. We rode together years back before he settled in Wallace. He runs the assay office now, respectable citizen and all that. And he knows about your past. He helped me after I escaped, gave me money, a horse." Nathan smiled at the memory. "Said if I ever needed anything, I should come to him. I'm hoping that extends to a bride and a fresh start." The word bride sent a flutter through Eliza's stomach. Despite their commitment to each other, the reality of their situation, both of them fugitives, sometimes made their plans seem like fantasy. "You think we'll ever truly be free?" she asked, voicing the fear that occasionally surfaced. "Or will we always be looking over our shoulders?" Nathan considered her question seriously. "Idaho's different territory, different jurisdiction. With new names in a booming town like Wallace, we can blend in, build a life." He reached for her hand. "It won't be easy at first, but we'll make it work. Together." His confidence bolstered hers as it had from the beginning. Since that first day in the woods when he'd lifted her onto his horse, Nathan had been her anchor in a storm of uncertainty. They reached the outskirts of Wallace on a crisp autumn morning. The town was nestled in a narrow valley, surrounded by forested mountains. Mining operations dotted the hillsides, and the sounds of industry hammers, saws, the occasional blast filled the air. Nathan guided them to a modest house on the edge of town. "Thomas's place," he explained as they dismounted. "Better if we don't show our faces in town just yet." A tall, bearded man emerged from the house at the sound of their approach, squinting suspiciously until recognition dawned. "Nathan Evans, as I live and breathe." The men embraced with the easy familiarity of old friends. Then Thomas's gaze fell on Eliza, curiosity evident. "Thomas Cooper, meet Eliza Osborne," Nathan said, his voice warm with pride. "My fiancée." Thomas's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly, extending his hand to Eliza. "Any friend of Nathan's is welcome here," he said. "Though I admit he's full of surprises." Inside the house, over hot coffee and the first proper meal they'd had in weeks, Nathan and Eliza took turns explaining their situation. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as the tale unfolded. "So you're both running," he said when they finished. "Him from an old charge, you from a new one." "That's the sum of it," Nathan agreed. "We came here hoping for a fresh start." Thomas leaned back in his chair, considering. Wallace is growing fast, new faces every day coming to work the mines or provide services to those who do. Two more wouldn't raise eyebrows, he glanced between them. "But you'd need new identities, papers. Can you help with that?" Eliza asked. A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. "As it happens, I know a man who's skilled in such matters, discreet too." He rose from the table. "You two rest. You look done in. I'll make some inquiries." For 3 days, they stayed hidden in Thomas's home while he arranged what they needed. On the evening of the 3rd day, he returned with documents, marriage certificate, birth records, letters of recommendation, all for Nathan and Eliza Evans. "You're officially married according to these," he said, laying the papers before them. "Wed in boys 2 months ago. Nathan's a skilled carpenter looking for work in the mines. Eliza's a former schoolteacher." Nathan examined the documents with amazement. "These look genuine." "They are genuine for all practical purposes." Thomas tapped the papers. "My friend's very good at what he does." "How can we thank you?" Eliza asked, overwhelmed by his generosity. Thomas waved away her gratitude. "Nathan saved my life once. I'm just returning the favor." He hesitated, then added, "There's more. I spoke to Bill Harmon at the Silver King mine. They need a foreman for the night shift, someone who can keep the men in line and knows their way around timber supports." Nathan straightened. "You're offering me a job. The pay's good. Comes with a cabin too small but solid, on company land just outside town." Eliza looked at Nathan, hardly daring to believe their good fortune. A job, a home, new identities, everything they needed to start fresh. "When can I start?" Nathan asked. "Tomorrow night," Thomas replied. "And one more thing. The schoolhouse is looking for a teacher, the last one left to get married. When you're settled, Eliza, you might consider applying." That night, alone in the spare room Thomas had provided, they held each other close, whispering plans for their future now suddenly, wonderfully tangible. "A real home," Eliza murmured against Nathan's chest. "A real life. And a real marriage," he added softly, kissing the top of her head. "If you still want that." She raised herself to look into his eyes. "More than anything." The following day, Thomas took them to the cabin that would be their home. It was indeed small, one main room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen, but to Eliza, it was a palace compared to the prisons and camps she'd known. "It's perfect," she said, turning a slow circle to take it all in. Thomas left them with supplies, promises to visit, and a final piece of advice. "Keep to yourselves at first. Be friendly but not too familiar. Let people get used to you before you get too comfortable." They followed his counsel, establishing themselves gradually in the community. Nathan proved himself a capable foreman, respected by the miners for his fair treatment and knowledge. Eliza, after a month of settling in, approached the school board and was hired as the new teacher. Life took on a rhythm, Nathan working nights, Eliza days, their time together precious in the hours between. They furnished their cabin simply but comfortably, planted a garden when spring came, and began to put down roots in the community. In the evenings, they often sat on their small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. During these quiet moments, Eliza sometimes marveled at the journey that had brought them here from a desperate escape in Shackles to a life of contentment and purpose. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Nathan one such evening, nearly a year after they'd arrived in Wallace. "Helping me that day, taking such a risk." He looked at her with the same intensity he'd shown in the woods that first day, as if he could see into her very soul. "Never," he said. "Not for a single moment. Even though you could have been caught, sent back to prison." Nathan took her hand, his thumb caressing her wedding band, a simple gold circle they'd purchased with his first month's wages. "Eliza, before you, I was just existing. Moving from place to place, never settling, always looking over my shoulder. You gave me a reason to build something lasting." Tears pricked her eyes. "And you gave me back my freedom, my life." We gave each other a second chance, he corrected gently, and we've made the most of it. In the months that followed, their life in Wallace continued to flourish. Eliza became a beloved teacher, known for her patience and innovative methods. Nathan was promoted to day shift foreman, a position of greater responsibility and better pay. They saved carefully, with dreams of someday owning a small ranch outside town. The shadow of their past receded gradually, though it never disappeared entirely. Occasionally, news would reach them of manhunts for escaped prisoners in Wyoming territory, and they would spend anxious days until the stories faded. But as time passed, these moments of fear became rarer. 2 years after their arrival in Wallace, Eliza discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought Nathan to his knees, his hands trembling as he pressed them against her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with the women of Wallace rallying around Eliza with advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, and support. By the time she entered her final month, their cabin had been transformed to welcome the newest Evans, a cradle crafted by Nathan's hands beside their bed, tiny clothes folded in a chest, a rocking chair positioned near the fireplace. On a snowy December night in 1878, after 18 hours of labor attended by the local midwife, Eliza gave birth to a son, Thomas Nathaniel Evans, named for the friend who had made their new life possible and the father who had risked everything for love. As she cradled their newborn, with Nathan beside her, tears of exhaustion and joy streaming down her face, Eliza felt a sense of completion she'd never known was missing. They had created not just a home or a marriage, but a family, something neither of them had dared hope for during those desperate days on the run. "He's perfect," Nathan murmured, one finger tracing the curve of his son's cheek. "Like his mother." "He has your eyes," Eliza replied, noting the startling blue that peeked from beneath newborn lids. Their happiness was marred only by the knowledge that their son was born into a legacy of secrets. Someday they would need to tell him the truth about who they had been, what they had overcome, and why they could never return to certain parts of the country. That reckoning, however, was years away. For now, they focused on the miracle before them and the life they continued to build together. Thomas grew into a strong, curious boy with his father's adventurous spirit and his mother's quick mind. By his 3rd birthday, the family had achieved another milestone, purchasing a small parcel of land outside Wallace, where Nathan began building a proper house during his free hours. "It's not much," he told Eliza as they stood on their property, Thomas running circles around them in the tall grass. "But it's ours, legally free and clear." "It's everything," she replied, leaning into his embrace. The land represented more than just ownership. It was permanence, security, a statement that they were here to stay. In the spring of 1882, their family expanded again with the birth of a daughter, Emma Rose Evans. Thomas, now 4, approached his role as big brother with solemn responsibility, declaring himself his sister's protector from the moment he first saw her. Life was good, better than either Eliza or Nathan had dared dream during those dark days of captivity and escape. Yet beneath their contentment ran an undercurrent of vigilance. They still maintained certain precautions. Nathan avoided having his photograph taken. Eliza declined invitations to events that might be reported in newspapers. They both carefully monitored news from Wyoming. Their caution proved warranted in the summer of 1883 when a new mining superintendent arrived in Wallace from, of all places, Copper Creek, Wyoming. The news sent Eliza into a panic. "What if he recognizes me?" she whispered to Nathan late one night, after the children were asleep. "What if he's seen my wanted poster?" Nathan held her close, his own concern masked behind a reassuring exterior. "It's been 7 years, Eliza. You look different now. Your hair is different, you carry yourself differently, and he has no reason to connect Mrs. Evans, the school teacher and mother, with an escaped prisoner." Despite his reassurances, they took additional precautions. Eliza requested a temporary leave from teaching, citing Emma's young age as her reason. She limited her appearances in town, sending Thomas with Nathan for supplies when possible. For 3 tense months, they lived in heightened awareness until the superintendent moved on to another position in California. Only then did they begin to relax their vigilance, though the incident served as a stark reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Will it always be like this? Eliza asked as they sat by the fire in their new home, the children asleep in the room they shared. Always waiting for someone who might recognize us, always afraid, Nathan considered her question, his face serious in the firelight. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know that every passing year makes it less likely. Memories fade, people move on. And we've built something real here, something worth protecting. He was right, of course. Their life in Wallace was solid, respectable. They had friends, though few close confidants. Their children were thriving. The shadow of the past, while never entirely gone, had diminished to a whisper rather than a shout. By the time Thomas was 10 and Emma 6, the Evans family was firmly established in the community. Nathan had risen to the position of mine manager, overseeing operations at one of the largest silver mines in the district. Eliza had returned to teaching and was now the head teacher at the expanding school. Their home, completed 4 years earlier, was modest but comfortable, a 2-story frame house with a wide porch and enough bedrooms for their growing family, which now included 2-year-old James, born in the spring of 1886. A barn housed their horses and cow, while a chicken coop provided eggs, and a substantial garden supplied much of their produce. It was a good life, a life built on hard work, determination, and the unshakable bond that had formed between two desperate souls on the run. Yet even in their contentment, there remained the unspoken knowledge that it was all built on shifting sand, that a single recognition, a chance encounter with someone from their past, could bring it all crashing down. The reckoning they had long feared came in the autumn of 1889, 13 years after their escape. Thomas, now 11, burst into the house one afternoon, his face alight with excitement. "Pa, there's a U.S. Marshal in town. He's got a big silver star and 2 pistols." Nathan and Eliza exchanged a look of silent alarm. Federal marshals rarely came to Wallace unless tracking someone. "Did you speak to him, son?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice casual. "No, but Billy Thompson did. Says the marshal's looking for someone, an escaped prisoner from years back." Thomas's eyes were wide with the drama of it all. A woman who killed a bank manager in Wyoming. Eliza's hands trembled as she continued peeling potatoes at the sink, her back to her son so he wouldn't see the terror in her eyes. "That's quite a story," Nathan said evenly. "Why don't you go help your sister collect the eggs before supper?" Once Thomas had gone, Eliza turned to Nathan, her face ashen. "After all this time," she whispered. "Why now? I'll find out." Nathan grabbed his hat. "Stay here with the children, don't go into town for any reason." He returned hours later, his expression grim. Waiting until the children were asleep, he sat Eliza down at the kitchen table and took her hands in his. "His name is Marshal Daniel Wilson. He's reopened several old cases, including yours." Nathan's grip tightened. "He has new evidence. A witness has come forward claiming to have seen the real woman involved in the robbery, a known associate of the gang. She apparently resembled you enough that the initial identification stuck." Hope flared in Eliza's chest. "So they know I'm innocent." "Not exactly." Nathan's voice was heavy. "They suspect you might be, but the witness is unreliable, a criminal himself looking for leniency. The marshal wants to find you to question you, possibly clear your name. But if I come forward, I'd have to admit to escaping custody. That's still a crime." "Yes." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, now showing strands of gray at the temples. "And there's more. The marshal asked specifically about new arrivals from around that time, especially teachers. Someone must have given him our name." Eliza felt the world tilting beneath her. 13 years of building a life, raising children, contributing to their community, all potentially undone by a lawman's persistence. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Nathan was silent for a long moment, his face troubled. Then, with a decisiveness that reminded Eliza of that first day in the woods, he said, "We face it, together." "What, Nathan? No, listen to me." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We can run again. Take the children, go somewhere new, start over, or we can stay and confront this." I think it's time, but the risk is great either way. He squeezed her hands. But our children deserve better than a life on the run, and you deserve to clear your name if that's possible. The following morning, Nathan went into town alone, seeking out Marshall Wilson. The hours of his absence were the longest of Eliza's life. She moved through her tasks mechanically, trying to maintain normalcy for the children while her mind raced with terrifying scenarios. When she heard horses approaching, she sent the children to the back garden and steeled herself for whatever came. Nathan entered first, followed by a tall, stern-faced man with a silver star pinned to his vest. Marshall Wilson. "Mrs. Evans," the marshal said, removing his hat. "Your husband has told me an interesting story." For the next several hours, seated at her own kitchen table, Eliza relived the nightmare of her false accusation, trial, imprisonment, and escape. She omitted only the details that might incriminate Nathan, presenting him simply as a good Samaritan who had helped her reach Idaho. The marshal listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he sat back, studying her with shrewd eyes. "That matches what our new witness claims," he said finally, "and explains why we never found you despite extensive searching. Most escaped prisoners head for familiar territory." He glanced around the comfortable kitchen. "Not many establish respectable new lives. What happens now?" Nathan asked, his hand resting protectively on Eliza's shoulder. Marshall Wilson sighed. "Officially, Eliza Osborne is still a fugitive. The new evidence is compelling but not conclusive. I'd need more to fully clear her name." Eliza's heart sank. "So you're here to arrest me?" "Not necessarily." The marshal leaned forward. "I have some discretion in these matters. The crime happened 13 years ago. The real perpetrators are dead or imprisoned. You've built a life here, contributed to this community." He paused. "I'm not convinced justice would be served by dragging a mother of 3 back to Wyoming to face charges that may well be dismissed anyway." Hope flickered cautiously in Eliza's chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm satisfied Eliza Osborne is not in Wallace, Idaho." He rose from the table. "My investigation will continue elsewhere, and should definitive evidence of your innocence emerge, Mrs. Evans, I'll make sure you're informed." The implication was clear. He was choosing to look the other way, to allow their life to continue undisturbed. "Why?" Nathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Why would you do this?" Marshall Wilson put on his hat, adjusting it carefully. "Let's just say I believe in justice more than law. Sometimes they're not the same thing." He moved toward the door, then paused. "But understand this, if trouble follows you, if either of you step outside the law again, this arrangement ends." After he left, Eliza and Nathan held each other in silence, the magnitude of what had just happened washing over them. The sword that had hung over their heads for 13 years hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been sheathed perhaps permanently. "Is it really over?" Eliza whispered against Nathan's chest. "As over as it's going to get," he replied, stroking her hair. "We can live now, Eliza, really live." The following years brought a peace they had never fully known before. Though they maintained certain precautions out of habit, the constant fear faded. Their children grew, flourished, and began to make their own paths in the world. Thomas, with his father's aptitude for practical matters and his mother's intelligence, went to college in Boise to study mining engineering. Emma, artistic and independent, showed talent as a writer and dreamed of seeing her stories published. Young James, still finding his way, displayed a gift for working with animals that suggested a future in veterinary medicine or ranching. As their silver anniversary approached in 1901, Nathan surprised Eliza with plans for a journey, not the furtive travel of fugitives, but a proper trip to San Francisco to see the ocean neither had ever viewed. 25 years, he said as they stood on the beach, waves washing over their bare feet. "From the day I found you in those woods to now." Eliza leaned against him, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in colors more vivid than any she'd seen in the mountains of Idaho. "Sometimes I still can't believe it. That day, the chains, how desperate I was." She turned to face him, taking his weathered hands in hers. "You saved my life." Nathan shook his head, his blue eyes still striking despite the crow's feet that now framed them gazing into hers with the same intensity they'd always held. "No, Eliza, we saved each other." And standing there on the edge of the continent, with the vast ocean before them and the long road of their shared life behind, they both knew it was true. From the moment he'd lifted her onto his horse, iron shackles clanking around her ankles, they had been saving each other from loneliness, from fear, from lives half-lived in the shadows of the past. Their journey had begun in desperation and flight, but had transformed into something neither could have imagined on that fateful day in the Wyoming wilderness, a love that had not merely endured, but deepened through every trial, every joy, every ordinary day of their extraordinary life together. As the sun sank below the horizon, Nathan drew Eliza close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'd do it all again," he whispered. "Every moment, the danger, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it, to end up here with you." Eliza smiled, her heart full to overflowing. "So would I," she replied. "So would I." In that moment, with the Pacific stretching endlessly before them and the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, the shackles that had once bound her ankles seemed like artifacts from another lifetime, reminders of a journey that had begun in captivity, but had led, improbably and wonderfully, to the truest freedom either of them had ever known. The freedom of a love that had broken chains both literal and metaphorical, and had given them both the courage to build a life that, despite its foundation of secrets and risks, stood solid and true, a testament to the power of second chances and the extraordinary things that can happen when one person chooses to help another in their darkest hour.